I have a treat for you today. We have DRW, David Ramson Wood. And if you don't follow David, please go follow David right now. He does the hot take of the day. He's a former industry insider. So he had a company called One Energy Partners. They did exceptionally well. And now he's what you'd call an industry bad boy. Anyway, he's no fluff. He tells it like it is, and that's what I like about him. So, David, thank you so much for being here, man. What's going on?
No, I'm doing really well, Chad. Good to be here with you. I think we're both in our Corona compound quarantine classic area, and excited to be here.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, we are in the Corona compound. I didn't mean to do this at all, and as you know, we are living remote this year, and it just so happens that this month that we were in a compound, so to speak, of 100 acres in the middle of the redwoods. So it's a pretty cool place to be. Definitely secluded, but I think just wanted to talk about kind of the state of the market. Obviously, oil and gas has just been, crapped on, and yeah. Obviously my network, job seekers and people looking for new careers. We can talk about that, but tell me, just give me a high level overview on kind of what you're seeing right now, what you see the next 18 months or, 6 to 18 months looks like for the oil and gas business.
Yeah. So Chad, I start with the crisis we were in. And when I started writing the hot take of the day 18 months ago, I was calling attention to the fact that our industry was trying to grow itself out of debt. And to do that, they were picking up rigs and they were continuing to exacerbate the debt issues. And so in November of 2018, the US was producing around 11.8 million barrels a day. We were running around 945 rigs. We continued to run that really through mid 2019 before we started to see the trail off as investors were saying, give us cash. But the core issue was a debt issue. And then we grew production in a world that doesn't clearly need oil now, but didn't need it then. And we exacerbated the problem so that when the real crisis has hit now is a demand-driven issue, which we'll talk about. But the supply issue was we were already oversupplying the world. And the reason that March 7th, 2020 changed everything was because the Russians and Saudis, and in particular the Saudis historically, had protected a price. And as the US had grown from 2014 to 2020, we grew 4.5 million barrels a day, while the Saudis took 2 million barrels off the market to accommodate it. And the first time ever when Russia decided to punish the US for the tariffs, for the sanctions we put on Rosneft in December, the Saudis decided to punish the Russians and with us. So the supply issue was bad, and now we have 35 million barrels a day of oil that the world doesn't need. And that's why oil's trading at 18. It's going to head to 10. It could hit 0, and the industry has changed forever.
Wow.
Yeah. There's so
start out with
I don't. There's not a lot of foreplay. I sort of launch right into that.
I love it. Yeah, no, and you said it, that oil could go to 0. And you were on a call with Kelly, one of my partners, not too long ago. He thinks the same thing. Why are these guys still producing if they have any thought that things are going to go to 0?
Well, so that, that's part of the issue, and it's going to be part of the issue when we talk about the future that the US is now going to have to do because of the coronavirus stimulation. But fundamentally, companies were so levered with debt that the banks require them to have cash flow to even try and keep their covenants out. And so companies have said, well, we're hedged. But hedging is a financial transaction that you could sell at any time. But they're trying to act like business is normal, and they're trying not to scare their employees, and they're trying not to scare their vendors by saying we're going to 0. But on March 7th, the blog I put out the next day said that in the US for the remainder of 2020, we will hit 0 drill rigs and we will hit 0 completions. Now, practically, that's not really possible, but reality is we will go to less than 200 rigs total and less than 50 frac spreads, which is down 80% from where we were in October. And those jobs will never, ever come back. So that means 80% of op staff are never going to work in oil and gas again. That means 80% of the oil field service people who've been working in sales or fracs or rigs, or they're never coming back again. The industry, unfortunately, is now permanently gutted. And so as we look beyond the coronavirus and the demand returning, it's going to take so long to get oil out of storage that our industry, we're going to have to do something other than oil and gas for those who lose their job, unfortunately. I think 80% of employment goes away permanently.
Wow. So what do you tell someone? I mean, how do you tell that to someone that just got laid off that, hey, if you're looking for jobs in oil and gas, you're doing it all wrong? I mean, what do you tell them and what to do? I mean, do you look up just industries that are booming right now and get into that industry, or learn a new skill? I mean, what do you tell them?
So to me, I mean, I think for those who have just recently lost their jobs, I think the first thing to know is that it's the energy industry that caused it, not you. Now, obviously, the coronavirus exacerbated it and changed the future, but it's not your fault. And so the first thing to do is to not get down and not think that like you did anything wrong. You didn't. The second thing that I say is you should feel lucky, because at the same time as the energy industry imploded, every other industry in the world has been destroyed, and many permanently, because of our response to the coronavirus. So they've laid off staff, they've furloughed staff, they're not really doing anything. So every industry is now in the exact same place that energy was. And so if you've been laid off 6 months ago, for you to go get, let's say Macy's has a retail department where they do data analytics around who shops at their stores. And you would be competing for a job that people were already in with people who already had retail experience, and you would be trying to come out of oil and gas into that job. But now Macy's had to lay off all of their staff, and so did Disney, and so did ESPN, and so did Vox, and so did MSNBC, and so did Hilton, and so did United. So all these companies now have hundreds of thousands of jobs they're going to have to refill. And you have some of the greatest skills in the world because our industry was so incredibly dynamic. And so I think you've been given a gift to be able to transfer into an industry to do something that you love. So the most important thing is to know, what do you love and what are you really, really good at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, look, I certainly believe that you ought to do what you love. And, you know, I hear that a lot though. You're right. Like, hey, find your passion, you know, work for your passion. At the end of the day, passion doesn't make you any money. So you really have to go out there and really, I mean, look, a guy that is used to making 150K a year with a bonus and stuff. I mean, you know, he may have to go work at, like the opportunity you talked about, that may be a sub $100,000 a year deal. I mean, would somebody,
it might be a $50,000 a year job.
yeah, absolutely. So, you know, would you tell that I mean, what would you tell that person? Because chances are they can pretty much just sit on the sidelines and collect unemployment and make more money than that. What would motivate a person?
So let me ask, from an unemployment benefit, as I understand it, the benefits are relatively small and they only last so long. Is that fair to say?
Mm-hmm. They just got kicked up about 6 months, and it got $600 got added to what they were already getting, or a portion. I know it was about a fourth of what they were making for a set amount of time. Plus, they just got a stipend, so to speak, for another 6 months.
Well, the way I should answer that question is twofold. First, I would think of yourself as a professional athlete. I know you were a phenomenal golfer and were around that world.
You too.
Yes, but you were better. We still haven't played together, but I know you're better. But I have a lot of professional athlete friends, and you know, they wanted to continue their career, and they were making a couple $1,000,000 a year or whatever, and then they just weren't good enough anymore. And it wasn't an option. So yes, can you sit on the sideline and do nothing and get unemployment benefits if that's, if the pay is good? Yes. But at some point, you're going to wake up and say, I have 50 years left in my working life. I need to do something. And the reality is that $150,000 a year job is gone in every industry because we have destroyed the US and world economy so greatly by the last 3-week shutdowns of the virus that those high-paying jobs are just gone forever. And so as you think about what you want to do for the rest of your life, even if it's a $50,000 a year job, you're going to start at the bottom and you're going to work your way up. And it's going to be a meritocracy because, I mean, it's just like you're coming out of college again. Everything has started new. I saw someone post today on my LinkedIn post that this quarantine feels a lot like college in that we've added 15 pounds. We drink anytime we want. We can go around in our pajamas. And at some point we have to go back, like get a real job. That felt like a really good sort of transition. So yeah, can people stay home? Sure. If people want to stay home, people stay home. But you have an opportunity now when the economy restarts that merit-based employment is going to be a thing because these companies are going to need to figure out how to be creative and how to get their business back so they don't fail. And a lot of businesses are going to fail and a lot of the world is going to change. So you can start a business that caters to the new business model that old businesses can't serve. Like look at Amazon disrupted book sales and now look at them.
Yep.
Like now is the time to disrupt.
Yeah, I just did a post the other day about Mark Cuban, and he said that I think he said this on Twitter last week or sometime a little bit ago, but basically he said in the next 5 years, some disruptor business like an Amazon or a Facebook will come out of this situation because you do have to get creative. And, what I'm telling a lot of people is, look, you need to learn a new skill out there. This is a great time to do it. There's so many things that I've been putting off, not only my job seeker program, but I've been putting off, my recruiting program. So I'm teaching people how to start a recruiting firm because it's really changed my life. And, people talk about, real estate and they're going to get in the real estate business and they're going to get in e-com and all these other business ideas. Well, when I tell them what's, available on the recruiting side, they're like, wow, that's absolutely incredible. Anyway, so I'm working on that, but I've been putting a lot of this stuff off, and now there's opportunities to be able to capitalize on some of these ideas that I have had for a long time. And so I've been telling people, look, you need to learn a new skill. If I was looking at it, I was like, what do businesses need all the time? Businesses need leads. If you can bring leads to business, they will pay you for it, and they'll pay you handsomely. And so learning how to, run ads or, Google ads, Facebook ads, whatever. I mean, that is always going to be in demand. I don't care how bad the economy gets. Businesses need customers. And if you can help them find customers, I mean, you're very valuable in that standpoint.
I mean,
so,
absolutely. And
yeah, I'm right with you there.
And if you think about like a lot of people and in the last year, people who had been laid off in previous rifts sort of said, well, our industry doesn't embrace technology and it doesn't do this and it doesn't do that. And we could be so much more efficient. Well, part of the issue is that the people who have been successful were successful doing it a certain way. And they've built up an entire culture and a process-driven organization that does it that way. And so when you blow something up or when you start something new, if you have no chains to limit you to the way it used to be, think of all of the change that you can make. And again, employees who are still employed, yes, they have an income, but they're sitting at their desk terrified that they're next. I mean, we are not close to the bottom. Like in May and June, the rig count is going to fall from here another 80%. Every company who has operating staff, people are sitting at their desk expecting to be fired. And so for people who are already out of work, you have a 6-month head start, and all of the things you've had to go through, you've already gone through. So look at the world the way it is, not the way you wish it was. And so the real estate comment that you made, look,
Mhm.
if you believe in Zoom and you believe that now because people have been forced to use technology, just like you and me, Chad, you're in California, I'm in Arizona, this isn't where we live, but we're able to
Mhm.
work and communicate in video. So now do you not need to travel? Do you not need hotels? That means you don't need commercial real estate, which means that that needs to be repurposed into something else. What is the next business that repurposes former offices into a thing that doesn't look like WeWork? Which doesn't WeWork look like the worst business plan in the history of ever right now?
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful.
Get together with a whole bunch of people you don't know in a crammed in room with metal surfaces and like just hang out and work. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, I was talking about that the other day. I even put that in my 7 things you don't need to start a recruiting firm. That's one of my points in there is you don't need office space. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the fact that somebody told me I have to have office space to be a successful person, that's completely idiotic. And the fact that we work and some of these, some of these co-working spaces can charge you, you know,
Premium.
$1,500 to $2,000 a month for 300 square feet is horseshit. So,
I mean, even
anyway,
in my book,
it,
even in my book, Chad, I mean, I talked about that from my first time I started a business in 2012. I said the rules for starting a small business was business plans are stupid because you don't actually know where the business is. You need to respond. Number 2 was salaries were stupid. Don't raise money from your friends and family to pay yourself a salary. That doesn't make sense. And third was offices are stupid. And One Energy was able to build a $300 million plus business with 7 people on a video conference working in 4 different cities and no paper files from 2016 to 2018, drilled 4 wells in the Permian Basin. We didn't have an office. We didn't have staff. We didn't have like physical locations. We did it all via video conference. So it's
wow.
possible. It's don't let other people's expectations of you dictate what you think you need.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that 20% that's going to stay in the industry. I don't even know if it's 50% still in the industry and we still got 30% to go or whatever. What do you say to that 20%? I mean, I know what I've been saying. I've been saying, look, you have to go to your boss tomorrow and say, what can I do? If you're in that 50% right now, and we still got 30% to go, and you are just completely scared that, there's nothing that, I mean, you're going to be fired tomorrow. You're going to come in, they're going to sit you down and say, hey, you'll get a package from UPS. Take a look at that. But I've been saying, look, go to your boss right now, or go to whoever you think is your superior now because your boss has already got cut, and say, what can I do? Like, what else can I do to add value to this? Is there a project? Is there something that I can do that's not in my job description, but I don't care. I just want to be of value to this company. So it makes me hard to fire, so to speak. What do you say to that, that 30% or that 50%,
Yeah, the people that were
and then
left.
the 20%?
I mean,
Yeah.
look, this is going to sound kind of cynical. If you're going to get laid off, you're probably already like, no matter what you do, it's an interpersonal thing. And I think that the learning that should come out of this for everybody is that, like, when I started One Energy or co-founded One Energy, and anything I did previous to that and anything I would do subsequent, I always hire the people that I have worked with before, that I know well, because I trust them and I know what to expect, and they know what I am as a boss. And so, that's the reason that you might feel like your boss is favoring someone else, for good or for bad. That is just the way politics work. And it's not politics, it's trust. So you either know you have a great relationship with your boss, or you don't know if you have one, which means you don't. And so, without sucking up, the most important relationship you can have is with your boss, and having a trust, loyal relationship is going to help. On top of that, absolutely, if they want you to take out the garbage, you should take out the garbage. You should appreciate, because the reality is your salary is going to drop by 30 or 40%, even if you stay. Because the biggest cash compensation or cash cost businesses have is compensation and energy. And salaries and energy have been inflated for a very, very, very long time. And so you should expect your bonus is going to go away and you're going to lose 30% of your salary. So if you really want to help stay, offer to give up some of your salary today. Because by you giving up some of your salary, they can probably save some of your coworkers, and at least your boss will see that you're being selfless. It might not save you, but it wasn't going to, if you weren't savable, you weren't savable. That's just the reality of business.
Well, what do you say to the hiring, the folks, you know, the executives, the hire? I know you have a stance on executive pay and everything like that, and I get that. But like, what do you say to folks that actually need people to run their business? Like, you know, if they are in that 20%, that 20% still going to, like, they're still going to be open to opportunities, so to speak, open to the next challenge, or maybe they, you know, they find something else to do as far as they start a business or whatever. They've been evaluating that for a long time, and now they've, you know, taken the leap. And now we just have a flood of people out of the industry, and now nobody can. I mean, we're gonna have it just seems like to me we're gonna have a real problem on our hands as far as talent. Yeah, you could think that there's a huge pool of people, but if they've been so demoralized to the oil and gas business, they're just, once they get a taste of being out of it, and what that feels like, they're not going to come back. So what do you say to the hiring managers that are like, hey, we got to have this staff?
Well, I mean, the unfortunate thing is for the next 3 years, oil is not likely to go above 50. And so the unfortunate thing is there won't be any hiring for the, in my opinion, again, these are my opinions, but like, if you look at the state of the business, we are so cash strapped. Most people are going to go bankrupt. Let's use Whiting as the first mover. Whiting has already declared bankruptcy. And what does bankruptcy mean? It means it takes a whole bunch of the debt that it owed interest on no matter what it did, and it converted it into equity. Now it's going to have a new equity capital structure with some debt. And Whiting will be the first company in energy to emerge from bankruptcy. There are 5 or 6 private equity companies that run in the Bakken that have been dying to get out because their private equity sponsor needs to get liquidity so that they can close the fund, because their LPs want their money back, and there's nobody to sell to and no shares that they can take. But Whiting just came out with a brand new balance sheet, brand new debt, and they're going to give shares to all of those private equity companies. And they're going to go to the private equity people and say, I'm buying your company. Here are the shares. This is what you're worth. And I'm firing all of your people. And the private equity people are going to say, yes, that sounds good. And then Whiting will be this consolidated new player with a new name, who will have taken no staff and all assets, and they'll run with their existing team that they will lay off 50% more. And that will be the Bakken. So there's no hiring or no, you know, they're not pulling people back. So those private equity people are going to be talented because that's how they built a business. They might go back into oil and gas. It'll be hard. They might change industries. And so if you know someone who goes into a new industry, go work with that person in the new industry. But we're going to we're going to lose the jobs, and they're never coming back because of the consolidation and the bankruptcies that are coming. This was going to happen anyway over 3 to 5 years, but the March 7th event with Saudi and Russia means it's going to happen in 3 to 6 months, not 3 to 6 years. So again, it's not a rosy picture for energy, but it's important. Like, and you know, I say this all the time, hope is not a plan. That is what's going to happen. Therefore, you as a person need to take control of your career and figure out how can you best position to respond to that. And to me, that means using your skills to change industries or start something or whatever. And if that's a $50,000 a year job, so be it. You'll grow.
Yeah.
I'm not even worried about that, but that's the way you need to be looking at this.
Got it. Well, let's change gears a little bit. I want to ask you about this because I have an opinion on this. And, you know, if oil prices are going down to, if they could go to zero, what keeps people, I mean, why would an E&P company continue to pull that oil out of the ground? What is the motivation? You know, refineries love it, right? Like they can get feedstock cheap. And, so it's like awesome for them. Obviously, people are going to be driving cars. The planes, the plane traffic, I know the coronavirus has stopped that, but it's going to pick up after the coronavirus comes. So what motivates an E&P company to take it out of the ground when it's zero? My thought that, and I mentioned it the other day, I said that the government would have to subsidize oil and gas. And the thought was, if it ever just imploded where it stayed under $10, the motivation would have to be a national oil company. Now, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think there's any possibility that the U.S. nationalizes oil, or if not, how does it stay independent like we are right now?
So let's tie back to where we started. And so for those viewers who are crying because of what I said last and they're very sad,
I'm crying right now, David. I'm crying.
This is the important part. So yes, refineries in a normal world, refineries would be buying oil at $20 and they would be loving life. The problem is the world produces 100 million barrels a day and we are only burning 65. Unlike gold, where it's stored forever, or diamonds, which are effectively stored forever, oil needs to be burned. So there's actually refineries in the United States that are now shutting in because they have nowhere to put the gasoline they make, because of the 100 million barrels a day in the world that are being made every day, 64 million barrels of those are used for transportation, and none of us are driving or flying. So why are E&Ps still producing today? It's because they need the cash flow to convince their debtors that they're not going insolvent so that they don't declare bankruptcy. Because as soon as they declare bankruptcy, the shareholders don't own the company anymore and the board doesn't work for the management team, even though they're supposed to work for the shareholders. We know they don't. They work for the creditors. And then the management team gets fired, most likely. Then all the equity gets wiped out and then the debt's in control. So E&P teams, which honestly, these are people who grew up in the industry. Like when you have 64-year-olds, nothing against 64-year-olds, but when you have 64-year-olds who grew up in conventional oil in the 80s and 90s, running these companies, they don't understand supply demand. So they're doing what worked in 1985. But right now, your oil costs you $50 to make. You need to shut in. They've just resisted it because they haven't been willing to have the conversation with banks that says, banks, we're going to default you and we're going to run you through the coals in bankruptcy. So give us 6 months or 9 months or 12 months. So to answer your question, that's why we're fundamentally, so therefore oil has to drop to the level to force producers to shut in. And if that's 0, then it's 0. If it's 10, it's 10. I think it touches 10 and that it averages $18 a barrel in Q2. But oil producers will shut in. And the government's only choice is to guarantee the loans of E&P companies for 365 days to prevent them from going into bankruptcy, so that when demand returns and when prices can be higher than 10, they can merge and restructure. And those loans from the government will have limits on executive compensation and ability to fire staff and all those things. But no, I don't think we'll ever nationalize oil. I have for a very long time thought we would only have 10 companies left in 5 years, and they would only be big. So Exxon, Chevron, Shell, BP, EOG, but having bought Concho, Pioneer having bought Diamondback, Oxy, if they survive, having bought Conoco. Like massive, super majors, because capital will never return to this industry, because we've so effectively destroyed capital at a $50 price. At a $20 price, it's like lighting money on fire.
Well, that being said, what do you say to company? You mentioned Whiting. What do you say when they declare bankruptcy, but before that, the executive compensation, they start paying out bonuses? I saw a post the other day from the podcast guys. Oil and gas startup guys. Yeah, I saw a post he did the other day talking about Whiting and talking about people paying these insane bonuses right now. And if you look at the time of year, it is bonus time. People depend on that as their salary. So they were giving him a lot of heat from that. Maybe they deserve that heat. I get it. What do you think about that situation in particular as it relates to the bonuses?
Yeah, so the Whiting one was challenging. I mean, and the first, like, do you remember President Trump 30 days ago was saying, like, we're keeping the economy open, we don't need to shut down, that's crazy. And he shut down travel from China in January, and everyone thought that was crazy. And basically everything he's done at the time looked friggin' crazy, but he was first, and it turns out he was right. This isn't a political comment. Whiting was right to declare bankruptcy. And what they did was they went to their own board, because remember, the board works for the shareholders, but the board are all buddies of management. That's how they get there. And so before they declared bankruptcy, they had the board give the top 5 of the executives $15 million in cash comp payable immediately to replace the loss of the equity value that they have wiped out over the last 3 years, so that they stay through bankruptcy. Then they declared bankruptcy, which means now the board works for the creditors. They're going to go through a bankruptcy process. But what people forget is things that companies do just before they declare bankruptcy can be clawed back by the courts and the creditors, because officially management didn't have the right to do that, because the creditors owned the business at that point. So what's going to happen in the Whiting case, in my prediction, is that the entire Whiting management team will be fired for doing that. The entire board will be fired for doing that. And the creditors will take an incredibly harsh stance towards senior executives of that company, and they will bring in a new lower cost team to run the consolidation company that I talked about. And that will be the template for every other bankruptcy that comes, and there will be many in the next 3 to 6 months, because that payment was so egregious and so negative, and creditors historically wouldn't have clawed that back. But I believe now creditors are saying, NFW, you're getting that money. We're out with the old management. That's why you saw Reuters publish a press release that the big banks, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citi, were all building their own teams to take over companies so that management teams couldn't do that. So, I was annoyed by it because it was just so stupid. But the likelihood was that team ran the Whiting into the ground over the last 3 years and did nothing to prevent it. And in fact, they were still the first, even after replacing their management team, they're still the first company to go bankrupt. That management team was gone anyway. So they're going to get some sort of cash payment, cash comp, legal agreement, and they're going to walk out the door with cash. And that was the best way they could figure out to protect themselves, in my opinion.
Got it. Yeah. Wow. Well, certainly a lot of things to think about in the industry right now. It's crazy time. It's a crazy time for me as a service provider in the industry. I mean, my thought is that people are always going to need good people, and especially, that 20% that still stays in the industry. I think there's still going to be some, changes. And I think, at least for us, it's one of those things where if you have a superstar, companies always want that superstar to be able to come onto their team. And so, there's a lot of things up in the air. That being said, would you say there's just not any opportunity if you're an investor or something like that? I mean, which you are, but are you just putting your money other places? I know you're not giving investment advice or anything like that, but like, what I know you guys did really well at one. Are you going to capitalize on this at all, or is there just not any capitalization to be had?
So the reason I haven't restarted a company since we sold was because my view was, even if I had a $5 billion commitment, I'm not sure what I would buy. And the core issue is all the rock worth owning in the United States is already owned by a company that is on the verge of bankruptcy. And so I can't buy the asset from them because they're technically insolvent. So if I pay cash for it, the creditors will use something called fraudulent conveyance that says that the company did not have the right to sell that asset at that price, and I will lose the asset. So until a company goes through bankruptcy, I can't buy an asset. And so the only, when people say it's distressed, it's not really distressed because the price is so low The price I would be willing to buy it, no company will ever sell it. The price that investors would give me money to buy an asset, they would require me to hedge it and buy it at $20 a barrel. And you and I both know that there's no asset that's going to transact that way. So the company has to go through bankruptcy, and then through bankruptcy, they have a fresh balance sheet and they own the assets. So there's no reason for them to sell it on that side either. And so all that's going to happen is companies are going to refresh their balance sheet and then merge for equity and get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it'll take 3 to 5 years for them to shed non-core assets into maybe a cash world where big privates can buy them. So what am I doing personally? I don't believe there's any opportunities. There's always opportunities. There's not really any good opportunities to start a company in energy right now. And because of the coronavirus, I believe every business in the world is technically insolvent. So every hotel, every airline, every restaurant, every consumer goods, every business is technically insolvent because they have no customers. And so I am so concerned about the global world economy that I am in cash and I am short the market. I don't believe municipal bonds. I think they're going to default. I think Social Security is at risk. I think Medicare is at risk. I think the US dollar is at risk of no longer being the world's currency. I think hyperinflation is a risk. And I think a global nuclear war is a risk. Because the only way we got out of the Great Depression in 1929 to 1939 was World War II. And that is why I've been so publicly against shutting down for the coronavirus, because the economy is like a spinning top. And it takes 10 years to get that thing spinning, and it takes 2 weeks to knock it over, and it will take 10 years to get us back to where we were 2 weeks ago. So I'm personally terrified, but assuming the world doesn't end, everything is different after this. Debt will be very expensive. Houses will foreclose. Restaurants will close. Hotels will close. Airlines will go away. Trips will go away. And we'll have to bring all manufacturing from Europe and from Asia back to the US just to generate enough jobs for Americans. And so to me, building factories in Midland that can build what's currently being built in Asia is going to be the next wave, and that'll be Donald Trump's second term entirely. From 2020 to 2024, we'll be entirely rebuilding the American economy by making America great again, by building a wall, adding tariffs, and bringing manufacturing back, which is hilarious because that's what he ran on 2016, and it was too early, and now it's the only way to save the U.S. economy. How crazy is that?
That is nuts. Absolutely nuts. So, well, look, man, I really appreciate all the time. I know it is, it's hard to be motivated in a time like this, but there's certainly, if what you said is true, that we're bringing a lot back to the U.S. and we're going to start manufacturing again and doing, that is really, really cool to think about, because we've been outsourcing for so long.
And Chad, the last piece I would say is when people ask, like, if you're in oil and gas right now and you say, oh my God, David just said, I don't know if I believe it, I'm scared, but he was right about the fact that the industry was imploding 18 months ago. And he was right when it was massively unpopular to say that the coronavirus shutdown was going to destroy the US economy and that lives didn't. Of course they matter, but lives and the economy need to be balanced. So assuming that you get past all of that and the fear that you have of the bearded guy you don't know that just said all that stuff, oil and gas people have the best training to go into politics of anyone in the world, because you work in a heavily regulated industry with a lot of special interest groups and groups that hate you, groups that love you, lobby groups. You have regulatory, you have human safety, you have engineering, geology, land, finance. And at the core of our entire business is, do you make money and what are the economics of that business? And at 2 a.m, bad shit happens on a rig. You get a call and you have 3 minutes to listen to 3 minutes of data and make a decision that you know is going to be wrong, and that 12 hours later you'll change, and 12 hours later you'll change, and you constantly are using data to make the best decisions. You have to communicate very technical information in a very short period of time in a complex regulatory environment by putting human safety first. There is no better training for politics. And so if you're frustrated by what the government has done to our industry, to our country, if you're frustrated by the fact that politicians are sheep and are following each other and not making decisions, and if you're frustrated by the fact that other people have controlled your freedom and liberty, it's time for the best people that we have in our country to run for politics and to make a difference by not being electable and not saying bullshit, but by saying the truth, being transparent, putting your views out there, and being willing to be wrong. And so that's why ultimately, when you ask what I'm going to do, I'm going to run for probably governor, congressman, or senator in one of the states, because I am tired of politicians making decisions that make no sense for any of my peers, none of the economy, and we end up in a worse place because people were afraid of not getting reelected.
That's awesome. That's awesome, David. Well, I'll certainly hope that I can be on a small list as your campaign manager. But
100%.
anyway,
We're going to need everybody. We're going to need everybody.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mind blown. Absolutely. But David, thank you so much for being on, man. This has been great. Talking tough love or just what people need to hear right now and to be prepared for it. I love how you consistently give people raw stuff. You don't fluff it or anything like that. There's a lot of people that try to fluff things, say things are going to be better, but you really give people the truth, and I respect you so much for that. So thanks again for being here. I'm gonna put, if you enjoyed this, please share this out to your group because a lot of people need to see this. But
And you can
I'll let you go here
anytime. Reach out anytime. My information's on the web, and Chad will put it in the show notes. But I really appreciate what you having me on, and I have since we met almost 2 years ago. I've always really appreciated your content and the way that you're using social media to differentiate your brand and bring value to people. And I think that the world is changing and that's so important that people can learn a lot from what you're doing. And I really appreciate the content you're putting out there.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, David. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, like David said, I'll post about him where you can follow David and his hot take of the day in the comments here. So if you want to take a look at that. And until next time, you guys stay safe and have a great day. See ya.
Peace.